I couldn't resist giving this sermon a course title, Love 101. And like many introductory courses, today we will explore something most of us are familiar with, but we will try to go deeper with it. I used to think the monk in the parable failed because he got angry. But recently, after listening to Glennon Doyle's book Untamed, I started to rethink that idea. For those unfamiliar with Glennon Doyle, she writes about her life experiences and personal growth. Before meeting her wife, Abby Wambach, she was married to a man who cheated on her. She writes about how frustrated she felt with herself when she couldn't let go of her anger, even after he apologized. But then she began paying attention to when the anger appeared. She didn't feel angry when they were co-parenting or handling daily life. The anger returned when he tried to reconnect emotionally. Eventually, she realized something important. Her anger wasn't the problem. Her anger was information. It was telling her that she no longer felt emotionally safe. For Glennon, listening to that message meant leaving the marriage, and when she did, the anger faded. Her insight was simple but powerful. Anger is a messenger. It tells us when a boundary or core belief has been violated. The feeling itself isn't wrong. It's trying to help us. But while anger is an excellent messenger, it is a terrible tool. As a parent, I've learned this lesson many times. Toddlers are famous for violating our expectations about how society is supposed to work. For example, if I calmly explain that someone cannot have something, I expect not to get hit. And if I say hitting is not allowed, I expect not to get hit again. The anger messenger, however, does not care that this is a small child still learning emotional regulation. It is simply sounding the alarm to me. A boundary is being violated. When I used anger as a tool, yelling or reacting emotionally, it rarely worked long term. Maybe it stopped the behavior in the moment, but mostly I was teaching my child that yelling is how we respond to frustration. Eventually, I learned better tools: calm and consistent timeouts, helping a child name their feelings, teaching them to use words instead of reactions. I could feel the anger, hear the message, and then let it go, so I could actually solve the problem. Parents aren't the only ones tempted to use anger as a tool. Entire movements have faced that same choice. Many of you lived through the 1960s and 70s, an extraordinary time of social change. Civil rights, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, environmental movements, protests against the Vietnam War, which, fun fact, when I traveled to Vietnam in my 20s, I learned they call it the American War. While preparing this sermon, I went down a rabbit hole learning more about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And one moment in particular stayed with me. When he was 25, he moved to Montgomery, Alabama with his wife to accept a post as a pastor at a local church. A year later, Rosa Parks was arrested for not moving to the back of one of the Montgomery city buses. A group of Black ministers in town got a team together quickly to lead the bus boycott, and they appointed MLK to be the spokesman. A month into the bus boycott, someone threw a firebomb onto the porch of his home while he was out, and his wife and his 2-month-old baby were inside. When he returned home, he found police and an angry crowd of protesters gathered outside, some armed and ready for retaliation. After making sure his family was safe, he stepped onto the porch and spoke to them, urging calm and nonviolence. Later that night, alone, he wrote about lying awake, feeling anger rising as he thought about what could have happened to his family. He described himself as being on the verge of hatred, and then consciously stopping himself, saying, "You must not allow yourself to become bitter." Notice he does not criticize himself for feeling anger. Anyone would have felt anger. Someone had thrown a bomb at his home while his baby was inside. What he refused to do was let that anger stay longer than it needed to and let it become hatred. Because anger, if we hold on to it too tightly, easily transforms into something that clouds judgment and limits our ability to act effectively. Thinking back to the monk in the cave, the mistake wasn't that he felt anger. The anger was simply telling him that a boundary had been crossed. The problem was that he spoke from anger instead of letting it pass so he could respond wisely. And before moving off of MLK, just another quick fun fact. Halfway through that year-long bus boycott, MLK also finished his PhD. Like, he was 26, he had a newborn at home, he led a historic movement, and still finished his dissertation on time. And I'm looking at you, Michelle. Of course, it's easier to talk about these ideas than to live them. Last weekend, my wife Kate had a life-threatening allergic reaction that resulted in an overnight stay at the South County Hospital. Thankfully, she's okay now. And I also want to give a quick shout out to Dr. Lou Rubenstein. Many of you know him from the choir. Lou, would you stand up just for a second? He was the doctor in the morning that helped take care of her. So, during that time, someone in our lives, fully aware of the situation, chose to create conflict that required Kate to respond while she was still recovering. It turns out I have a core belief that when someone is recovering in a hospital, they are off limits. And I can tell you my anger messenger showed up immediately and very loudly. It has been difficult to let that anger go. But I also know that growth only happens when we are given opportunities to practice. Difficult people, as frustrating as they are, give us chances to practice mastering the emotion of anger, specifically to acknowledge anger, hear its message, and then choose something wiser. For us as Unitarian Universalists, social justice is a core value. When we see injustice, anger is often the first emotion we feel, and that makes sense. Anger tells us something important is wrong. But letting go of anger does not mean we stop caring. It means we care enough to act effectively. When anger settles, we can think more clearly, see things more creatively, and choose actions that actually move us toward justice. The movements of the 60s and the 70s understood this. There was plenty to be angry about, but their foundation was ultimately peace and love. Our covenant is not anger is the spirit of this congregation, and we do not seek the truth in anger. Love is the spirit of the congregation, and we seek the truth in love. And maybe that perspective is helpful when we think about our country right now. Before I wrap up, I want to add one more piece to this idea of showing up with love. One of the most powerful ways we show up with love is by trying to truly understand one another. Glennon Doyle writes about how people sometimes say, "I can't imagine doing something like that." And they say it with certainty, even judgment. And she points out that what we may really be saying is that we are not even willing to try to understand. Because understanding can feel uncomfortable. When we genuinely try to understand another person, we sometimes realize that under different circumstances, with different fears and experiences, we might not be as different from them as we want to believe. And that matters right now. In moments of division, especially political division, anger shows up quickly. It tells us that something we deeply value feels threatened. That anger is a messenger, but if we let it stay too long, it can convince us that people on the other side must be motivated by hatred or bad intentions. And once we believe that, understanding becomes impossible. Many people who voted differently from us were not trying to harm others. They were trying in their own way to do what they believed was best for the country. Some saw the nation as struggling economically and chose the person they believed could help most, even if they disliked other qualities about that leader. You don't have to agree with the assessment to understand it. Understanding does not mean agreement. It does not mean abandoning your values. It simply means being willing to see another person as human, complex, fearful, hopeful, and trying, just like you. And that willingness to understand is an act of love. It is also how we prevent anger from turning into something harder, something that separates us so completely that we stop seeing one another at all. When I think back on everything we've talked about today, the monk in the cave, parenting a toddler, MLK standing on his porch after a bomb threatened his family, the challenges in my own life, the lessons feel the same every time. Anger tells us something important, but love tells us what to do next. Compared to many nations, the US is still quite young. Sometimes I think it's fair to imagine our country as being in its toddler years, still learning, still reactive, sometimes even in a hitting phase. And what toddlers need most are not angry parents, but steady ones. People who set boundaries with patience. People who learn better tools. People who keep showing up again and again with love. Because anger may show us where healing is needed, but understanding, compassion, and love are what actually help us heal. I would now like to walk us through a brief exercise. I want you to close your eyes or find a focal point to look at and visualize someone you deeply care for. Take a breath in and let it out. Now, picturing that person, say the following out loud after me. May you be well in mind and body.
May you be well in mind and body.
May you be safe.
May you be safe.
May you live with ease.
May you live with ease.
May you know peace.
May you know peace.
Now, direct your focus on yourself. Saying out loud again, following after me. May you be well in mind and body.
May you be well in mind and body.
May you be safe.
May you be safe.
May you live with ease.
May you live with ease.
May you know peace.
May you know peace.
We're going to do it a few more times. I want you to visualize a neutral person, someone you recognize but don't know personally. You can say it yourself just in your mind. May you be well in mind and body. May you be safe.
May you be safe.
May you live with ease.
May you live with ease.
May you know peace.
May you know peace.
Now visualize someone with whom you have a challenging or strained relationship. A quick reminder that when someone acts mean or hurtful, it is often because they are unwell in mind and body, they don't feel safe, or they are not at peace. So keeping that in mind, think of that person and say the following. May you be well in mind and body.
May you be well in mind and body.
May you be safe.
May you be safe.
May you live with ease.
May you live with ease.
May you know peace.
May you know peace.
Wishing these things for that person would actually lead to a life that's better for you. So earnestly wishing for these things is helpful. The last one I want to do is lastly, direct your energy to everyone in this room, regardless of your relationship with them, and say, may you be well in mind and body.
May you be well in mind and body.
May you be safe.
May you be safe.
May you live with ease.
May you live with ease.
May you know peace.
May you know peace.
I want to take 2 minutes to really sit with that energy that we all just put out to each other. You put it out to others, and they put it out to you. So we'll take 2 minutes to feel it, and saying that mantra more if you need to. Now, please stand if you are willing and able, and open your great hymnal to number 121.